Section N, rental property. N1, delivery of possession of the property free of tenants. Seller shall deliver possession of the property at closing vacant and free of tenants, possessions, leases, property management contracts, short-term rental reservations, and other rental or service commitments. This one's important if it's an owner-occupied loan or the buyers that you represent intend on occupying. In some cases, they're purchasing a property that has a tenant in it and they're okay with it, or there's a lease on the property. And obviously, if there's a lease on the property, a long term lease, that lease transfers over. So there's two separate contracts you're dealing with. The sale of a property does not automatically void an existing lease between a tenant and a seller. So bear that in mind as well. But if there is the intention of purchasing a property with a tenant in it, and sometimes that could be by design. Sometimes it could just be that the buyer understands that there's 2 months left on the lease or whatever that might be. Then you're going to select not N1, but you'll select N2. And then you're going to request and require the rental documents. It's also important to note, too, that if you're doing this and there are tenants that are in there, that you make sure you handle the rental agreement, whether there's a property manager in place, and also any deposits that are being held for the tenant. So those need to be handled in the same way that was drafted, even though your buyer might not be the one that have drafted that contract. It still needs to be handled to the T of that contract or that agreement, that property management agreement. So going through that, if you intend on having this property delivered free of tenants, you're going to select N1, or you're going to select N2 if you know that there's going to be tenants that are in there. N3 would state rental agreement changes during the escrow period. During the escrow period, seller shall not, without the prior written consent of buyer, make any changes to the documents described in paragraph N2, or enter into any new rental agreement or vacation rental reservation which extends beyond the scheduled closing date. And that's important too, because you might think at least that there's a month left on the lease, but while in escrow, so after you have a fully executed agreement, and while you're in the escrow period, the seller shall not redo or extend that contract out further, as is described in N3.